All right, how's everybody doing tonight? I'm just going to put on the chat here one second. Welcome to Comic Book Team Up with myself and John's Longbox. Today we have Heather Veley, and she is a blogger and a cultural critic and is a first-time comic writer. And her comic is up on Indigogo right now, and the link for it is in the description. So Heather has also been following, I think, my channel for quite a while. So we've been exchanging emails back and forth for quite some time. So Heather, why don't you tell everybody about your blog and your book, and we'll see what we can do from there.
All right, sounds good. Hey guys, I'm Heather. The blog, I guess we should start with the blog since I've been doing that for a little while. The blog started back in 2019, and it's a little bit of a funny story. I was trying to find a side hustle, and there was this program to learn about copywriting, and it came with a free subscription to medium.com. And I thought to myself, oh, okay, I'll sign up for Medium. And while I'm learning copywriting, I'll just blog about some of the comic books I've been reading. Copywriting didn't work out, but I'm like, you know what? I have this blog anyway, so I'm just gonna keep on doing this. And I've been mostly blogging about the comic books I've read and really liked. Sometimes I'll explore like concepts of comic books that I feel are not covered enough. Like I know I have a article about the whole Comicsgate drama that happened, geez, it's almost 10 years ago. And I also have one talking about why I'm hesitant on digital comics. So I also do some anime stuff there too.
Put the name of your blog in the private chat, and I'll throw it in the public chat so people could click on it.
All right. It should just be my
It's in the description, John, if you can reach that. I don't know if you can get that from here, but
I don't see the description on StreamYard. I'm not on YouTube.
Give me a minute. I might be able to pull it up.
It should just be my first and last name on Medium.
Okay, there it is. Oh, okay. So I'll put this in the chat.
So I've followed your blog for a little while now, and you've been slowly going through, well, you have a lot of indie comics on here, but you've been slowly going through, I think, the great comic runs and great comic series, if you're going through mini series and maxi series as well. So what draws you mostly to older comics? I just wanted to ask you that long and ever ago.
Well, I'm not entirely sure. The art I find is more appealing, especially with Crisis on Infinite Earths with Perez's art.
Oh, yeah.
There's just something really beautiful about his artwork that you don't really see nowadays, unless it's in the indie sphere, which a little disappointing. And also it's more nuanced. Like there's some aspects of the older comic books where they can't really get too into the nuance because of the CCA and you can't go into certain topics. But I feel like the characters themselves were a little bit more nuanced way back then, whereas in nowadays with more modern comics, especially with the big two, they kind of sort of go off this assumption of you already know these guys, and they just don't really go into the more different aspects of their character as much as they used to, I feel.
I want to ask you, so you just read the Crisis on Infinite Earths recently?
Over the summer, yeah.
So what did you think of the story and everything? Because it's such a product of its time and kind of a dated story. Like, I wonder, I didn't think anybody would go and reread it these days, you know? So.
Well, I always wanted to, because again, I was drawn in by the artwork, but I've always heard it around the comic circles, and it's considered one of the books that you should read even if you don't like it. So I decided to give it a read, and I absolutely can see why people don't like it, because this is basically DC trying to take the multiverse and squish it into one universe, which
is the opposite of it's the opposite of right now. Now your grandmother understands the multiverse.
Well, I wouldn't know about that because she didn't know that there were multiple Robins. Saying
But,
that.
you know what I mean? The regular person, Joe Blow on the street, could grasp the concept of the multiverse. So I always thought that the Crisis on Infinite Earths, it succeeded in that it sold comics, and it made, before Crisis, I wouldn't touch DC because DC was always kind of hokey and childlike. So it worked in that, but it failed in that it did not streamline DC. It in fact made it more confusing.
And I've made the point in this article. If you are brand spanking new to comic books, you absolutely should not start with Crisis on Infinite Earths because it is super convoluted. There are a whole bunch of characters that you would not know jack about if you only know the Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman trio. And I've told my boyfriend this. He's starting his own comic books journey, and I told him flat out, I am not letting you read this until you read more DC, because he would not know anything about what's going on. He's not going to understand the dramas, the little dramas happening between the characters. He's not going to understand why this was such an important event. So he's on his own journey, and this is very future reading, but yeah.
So, I mean,
I can remember reading it, and even me, who was buying all of the additional Crises tie-ins and all that kind of stuff, and was used to buying DC, and I was like, I'm reading the stuff about the Scarab and Blue Beetle, and how the what is it? The phantom creatures, when they touch them, they explode, and all this thing.
Their shadows.
Yes. How does this make sense? I'm trying to figure this out. Right. So it is convoluted. I'll give you that. Although I do remember it fondly.
I got it when it came out, and I was like, what's going on? But I trusted Marv Wolfman, and I absolutely love George Perez. So I stuck with it. I love it for so many different reasons, but did you follow it, Heather? When you read this, did you oh yeah, I get this, I understand what's going on, or were you just I'm just following along the ride?
Kind of. I still don't understand the whole past where it had that pink guy, and something he did triggered it, and it turns out Pariah technically wasn't the one who started the whole shebang.
Yeah.
And the Anti-Monitor apparently could do this whenever he wanted to, and it's I'm still very confused, but I think I got most of it. I might need to reread it to fully understand what they were trying to go for. What I want to see is a documentary about the behind the scenes of this, because from when I was doing my own little research, and by that I mean I kind of went on Wikipedia and just listing off some of the stuff they had to do, hire a researcher to actually catalog everything and trying to make sure they get all of the characters in there. And it's I want to hear the drama that was going on, because I'm pretty sure there was more than one person behind the scenes who was just tearing their hair out, being why are we doing this?
Especially at DC. Yeah, because Jim Shooter tells stories about when he wanted to introduce continuity, because Marvel was kicking the butts of DC, and he said he was writing the Legion of Superheroes at the time. He went to his editor and he said, I want to introduce continuity, and his editor told him, we don't do that here. And he just dismissed him with the back of his hand. He said, and he introduced it anyways. But that was the kind of mindset that had run through DC for so long. And to have this entire thing just fall in their lap, where they have to tie every continuity together, it would have been a nightmare for that company.
RJ, I started sharing this image just because I just wanted to say that this comic that I'm working on now is basically a love letter to Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's Eddie is Doomed. I'm working with 2 different artists, so there's going to be a real world about a comic book guy who's freaking out because his beloved continuity is changing. It's my apology. When I read Crisis on Infinite Earths, there was old timers in this, what are they doing to Superman? What are they doing? And I was like, you old people. Now I'm the old person getting mad at the new 52. So I'm kind of making a comic book to apologize to those people. I get it. Eddie is Doomed is about his comic book. his childhood is over. It's Love and Rockets meets Crisis on Infinite Earths.
That's a weird combination.
Yeah. So the real world is going to be black and white, real poor Eddie, and then comic books. So I just wanted to show that since we were talking about the Crisis. Thank you.
I was thinking about this today and yesterday, thinking to myself how they can never actually come back from what they have done to modern comics because they spent so long. Marvel built its entire company on continuity, and DC tried to copy that with Crisis on Infinite Earths and bring in continuity. And that's what comics have been built off for the last 50 years. And when American comics are built on continuity, and you screw up the continuity so much as they've done in the last 10 years, there's just no coming back from that. I can't see how to fix that.
RJ, I had a revelation like in the past 2 weeks that as much as I like Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, whatever, I realized that I'm a fan of Marvel comics. And I love this whole universe. I love knowing that, the Invisible Woman and the Fantastic Four were doing this. And at the same time, the Avengers were over here doing that. And I love all the little strings, like I picture like that conspiracy guy with the strings on the blackboard. I love putting all that together. It was so much fun, and then DC tried to copy that, but ironically, by copying that, they doomed their company because now every 5 years they reboot. And I realized I can't really care about DC anymore because I get invested in these characters, and then it's Identity Crisis, and then they start all over again, and it's 0 Hour, and they start all over again. And it's New 52, and now it's like, you want me to care about Absolute Batman? How long before that's swept under the rug?
Yeah, I was looking at something this morning. I was just thinking, I was looking for something to post on X, and I pulled up this really nice cover from, I think it was a Supergirl #1 from New 52. And then I thought to myself, it's New 52. No one cares, right? I don't know. Were you buying comics when New 52 came out, Heather?
I was. And then they did that whole rebirth thing, and it's like, why are you doing this? I'm thinking that they restart it every time they get to a point with the new continuity. They're like, oh, where do we go from here? Oh, well, we'll just reboot it. And it's like, why should I care about what you're doing? And if you try to even say, like, if someone throws out a wild fan theory and you say, no, that's not the character, I've been reading this character, they'll be like, oh, well, in this continuity, they're like this, so therefore I'm right. And it's like, no, and that's why I'm really frustrated by that.
So is like this Absolute Batman? I didn't read it because I don't care. Make Batman good. Now they're making Absolute Batman, and it's like, oh, in this one he's not rich and he's violent and he has blonde hair, and I'm like, so it's not Batman. If a movie came out of Absolute Batman, I think the comic book fans would be like, it's not a Batman movie,
What I want to know is why don't they bring back like the Elseworlds comics? Like they were doing that all throughout like the late 80s and 90s, I believe. And I mean, a lot of it they were really messing with Batman, putting him in different situations or putting Superman in different situations. So it's like, if you want to explore different story ideas so badly with these characters, why not just bring back Elseworlds? Because at the very least, we could say, okay, that's an Elseworlds story. Right. So you don't need to worry about that with the continuity.
I saw you said, why are you wary of digital comics?
Uh-huh.
Why is that?
If I remember correctly, my main argument is if you put it on digital and you make it where you have to go through a specific server, and I'm not talking about, pirating comics. I'm talking about actually going through like, the Amazon comic book service. Is that still around? I've been hearing that they've been shutting that down lately. Anyways, yeah, you can access the digital comics whenever you want to, but who knows if they decide to tweak it a little bit, especially with comics especially with comics who are not politically correct, or they have an element that was really cool at the time, or at least was just considered wacky at the time, that's considered really problematic now. I'll give an example that I mentioned in my article. This is not comic books, this is movies. In Lilo and Stitch, there's this one scene where Nani is chasing Lilo, and Lilo hides in the dryer of
Right.
and Nani gets her out of there. Well, they decide to digitally alter that where she's hiding in a pizza box under a table because
Right.
they were afraid that kids would get this idea to hide in the dryer to get away from their parents. And it's like, that's a really dumb change there. And my argument is, okay, they're willing to do that with movies. Who's to say that they're going to do that with comic books digitally? Because as much as we like to rag on some of the more modern creators and they're trying to make everything more PC, I mean, the comic book industry wasn't so bad, but they did have their missteps. Like there was that one time that the Punisher was made black and then back, which was like, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
And it's like, who's to say that they would just cut that entire arc out or try to reframe it as something different? Like try and alter it and, oh, it's just this new skin treatment. They didn't actually do that with him to try and make it more palatable for modern
Or
audience.
just change his skin color and tweak the dialogue and ignore it or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, definitely would do that because that's the kind of thing they used to do with coloring all the time. I remember, it was Dale Keown's run on, I can't remember, Hulk. Who the hell? It was in the late 80s. Anyways, they had to basically, he drew the woman without clothes all the time. She was always crying, but they came in and just colored her digitally so that it looked like she had clothes on, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, I've done videos probably 5 years ago now about Marvel doing the exact thing you're talking about, changing dialogue from older comics. I think there was one scene between Thing and Spider-Man. They changed the digital comic so it didn't say what originally it said. They're way into removing the cigar out of Wolverine's mouth all the time
Yep.
in
I
the
was gonna
digital
say one of my
comics.
favorite comics of all time, Marvel 2 and 150. They're all sitting around a poker table. It's Nick Fury, Ben Grimm, now I can't even remember who else, but one of them was Carol Danvers as Miss Marvel. She's joining for the first time, and they hand her a cigar because they're all playing. But is that going to be changed? It's just a Wonder Man sign, the Beast, and they're all playing poker with their little shades and whatever, those visors, cigars. I wonder what that looks like right now. Michael Berchowski saying they took all the cigars out of DuckTales. I don't know. I like my physical media because it can't be changed. I have my CDs, I have my vinyl, I have my comic books. My wife's upstairs, she has all her DVDs.
It's like the
And
French
even-
Connection. They cut a scene out of that because
Really?
of the language he was using. And this was the media archives, which are supposed to archive movies and shows them every once in a while, has cut scenes from the archived version of French Connection
Oof.
because they didn't want it in there anymore.
I noticed that I was watching Pom Poko on YouTube with my boyfriend, and I had seen the DVD version of it, but when I was rewatching the movie, I noticed that they cut a few scenes. They were small scenes, and ultimately, I guess they wouldn't hurt the plot, but I noticed it, and it's like, why? And it's like, why are you so afraid to accept this media that it might not have the most agreeable stuff in it, like smoking or maybe a naughty word, or I will even defend media that has a racial slur in it if it fits in the scenario, or it's like that was the language they used at the time. So it's like that was the time. Like back in the 80s, everyone smoked. Like that's just the thing that happened. You can't just pretend it didn't happen because
I went to the movies to see Die Hard. I've never seen Die Hard until a couple of around last Christmas. They re-released it, and it was funny. As we're watching, I'm like, look at that guy smoking for no reason. Look at it was shocking. Just a guy just talking and smoking. You don't see that anymore. Like, is that deleted now? And if I was to watch that on streaming or something,
I think I do have like a certain explanation. They're afraid that if you see it on the screen, then you'll think, oh, that's okay, and then you'll want to replicate that, and it's like, no. Like, I've never thought to take up smoking because I saw like a noir flick where the detective was smoking and I thought smoking was cool. I'm aware to know that that's just his thing.
I did jump off the roof of my house with an umbrella once. So went out all smart, but I bought I forget how much I spent, like $125 for a nice bookshelf edition of why can't I think of his name now? The French comic. I'm looking at it right here. Tintin. And it's got all the Tintin books. And then when I got it, I noticed that you could squeeze it, and one of the volumes is missing. Tintin in the Congo is missing.
Oh.
Because of the depiction of black people, the jet black with white lips, it's from the 30s. But I spent $125 on this. I knew what I was getting. Now I got to go track down a Tintin in the Congo and put it in this, because there's space for it. It's just that the publisher, somebody said, no, you got to get rid of it. So somewhere there's a big stack of these Tintins in the Congos that they obviously made, or they wouldn't have made the slipcase.
Now that you mentioned that, like the Spirit, I know the Spirit, he had like a little sidekick back in the day.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was a caricature, but that's just who he was. Did they digitally alter him too?
In a few editions that they did, like and the same with Captain Marvel, Shazam, he had a Pickaninny sidekick at one point too. And there was a big debate. They were going to reprint that, and it was like $150 hardcover edition, and they actually put it to a vote, and the people said, listen, I'm spending $150 for a historical archive edition, warts and all. I want to see the good stuff, the bad stuff, because it's historical. But if you're going to make a $12.99 reprint, I can understand you changing that character, because that's supposed to be for in a storefront. But for a historical archive edition of Captain Marvel or the Spirit, Kitchen Sink left Ebony the way he was, and I can't remember the Captain Marvel sidekick, but they left him, and I thought that was good. Put a little thing at the beginning.
Yeah. Say like look, this was just how he was first depicted, and
right.
It was a long time ago. Like, obviously we know better now.
This is history. Like I remember when I was in college, they were having a history of film, and they were showing important movies from history, and one of them was why can't I think of the name of that stupid movie with the Ku Klux Klan that came out in the 19s?
Birth of a Nation.
Birth of a Nation. They were going to show, and people were protesting. It's like, dude, this is a part of American history. You know what I mean? It's like teaching American history, and slavery is problematic, so we're not going to teach slavery. You know what I mean?
And also, I think that like with Birth of a Nation showing that is an interesting way to show kids, look, you think that the Klan is like, you think that they're all evil and they're just doing this for evil, but it's like, you watch Birth of a Nation, this is how they think of themselves, and this is how they justify it to themselves to do this. So it's like, you can't get rid of it and pretend that didn't happen, because it did happen, like I said before. But also, I feel like consuming art like that can teach you just how people thought and how people justified like what they did back then, or they justified certain decisions they made. And so if you censor that, then you don't get the full context.
Especially if you want to have a class or whatever of American film, and you don't want to show Birth of a Nation, like it or not, it's a part of American film history. It's an important part of American film history. It's like, I don't know. So
what's funny about this as well is that they're even doing that to movies which were supposed to show the opposite. I'm thinking like 48 Hours, right? The whole point of 48 Hours was that what's his name? I can't remember. Is Nick Nolte?
Nick Nolte?
No, yeah, Nick Nolte was supposed to be racist at the first of the movie, right? And he keeps on calling Eddie Murphy spear chucker all the time, right? And all these things, and he's using these racial slurs. But by the end of the movie, he thinks of him as a partner. So the whole point at the time was to show this guy as he was and how he changed his mind. But no, they won't show that anymore. They won't allow this to be shown anymore, even though the entire point of the movie was to see somebody grow. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
and that's kind of why I'm hesitant on digital media. It can be good, like if it's something that's completely out of print and you are just not able to get it anywhere, then digital media can be helpful. But I'm also very wary of it because of those problems, because it's like, if I want to consume this media, I want to consume this media as it was.
Yeah, I actually got an email. I started my channel, and I was taking like the rarest comics in my collection and and showcasing them. And one of them is Millie the Model #1. It's from 1940. I don't know how I ended up with this comic. I don't remember buying it. It just magically showed up in my collection, and it's in surprisingly good shape. So I was talking about that in a video, and I got an email from some guy who archives comics. He says that's one of the comics that we're missing, and he wants me to scan it so that they could preserve all comics. And I feel like it's my duty to scan this, but I just don't know how to go about doing it without wrecking my comic. It's been about over a year. I got to get back to this guy. He probably thinks I'm blowing him off.
There's a scanner you can put on your phone. It's called Cam Scanner, John. You don't have to actually bend the comic. You just got to open it up and just basically take pictures. It will scan the entire thing, and it'll readjust the pages so that they're flat as well, if you use it correctly. So
what's
just
it called?
Cam Scanner.
Oh, cool. I'll look that up. Thank you, RJ.
But I'll probably get use of that too, because I have some comic books that I plan on scanning so I can read them, like do like an audio reading of them. So yeah, that'll be useful.
Oh yeah, cool. But that I think is great for digital, because not everybody could go out and buy Millie the Model #1 or Fantastic Four #1. So like I do like the idea of like a digital Gutenberg project. So everybody has access to all these cool comics and stuff. But at the same time, if I buy Fantastic Four #1 digitally, I want the original I want the letters page. I want the the advertisement. If there's an unfortunate word, which there isn't, not in Fantastic, I want to see that. I don't know. So
or even something silly, like wasn't there an X-Men comic back then where there was an editor error? If I remember correctly, it was like Beast asked Jean Grey, "Hey, can you pass me," I think it was the screwdriver, and she's like, "Yeah, sure." So she uses her psychic powers, and she accidentally gets the pliers, and Beast says, "You're a credit to your gender."
Yeah.
that was a screw up where it was supposed to be pliers instead of screwdriver, and it ended up being a backhanded comment, and it's like, even if you wanted to digitally alter it, I feel like you should keep stuff like that in, because A, it's funny, but
it's
B,
a part of comic book history.
It's part of comic book history, and it shows that, look, even the greats, they made mistakes back then.
My favorite goof up in comic books is Defenders 89, and it's such a boring comic. It's one of those comics in between this event, this epic story and this epic story. It's like the Defenders hanging out at home kind of story, but there's a TV, and on the TV screen is a Trix rabbit, and he's got a box of cereal, and it just says shit. So the artist just wrote shit, SHIT, on the box as a joke, figuring somebody would catch it and delete it, but they never did. So it's, I love that mistake. And it's just a smiling rabbit, I remember when I was like 12 years old or whatever, my friend was like, "You got to get it became like a quest to find Defenders 89. It's in like the page 3 if anybody looks for it.
Well, people would probably get away with that now with the modern industry, with how the editors are not actually paying attention to their jobs. So they probably could still get away with that.
Yeah. Well, there's probably worse. It's probably worse on purpose in modern comics.
Mm-hmm.
So were you like a little girl into comics?
Kind of. When I was very little, I used to go to piano lessons, and my piano teacher, when you were waiting for the next person to leave, so it was your lesson, she had like this little waiting area, and she had a little stack of older comic books. And I remember one was a Heathcliff comic. One was like an old drug PSA, like don't do drugs or else it'll ruin your life, and blah, 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 blah. I mean, it will, but... And the third, I cannot remember the name. I was trying to find it earlier because I knew this question was going to come up, and I just cannot remember the name. I remember it was like this kid with white hair. He was like in a little red spacesuit, and he's like traveling around the galaxy with these couple of robots, and I cannot remember the name of it. And then I permanently borrowed those comic books, and then I went on to get the Spider-Girl. It was a Spider-Girl comic where Peter Parker and Mary Jane had this kid, and she grows up, and
those were excellent comics.
Yeah, and I a couple of years ago, I found the trade paperback and I was flipping through it, and I did not remember Vampire Daredevil, but okay. I would need to reread that. And then I got interested into manga, so I dropped out of comics for a little bit to focus on manga. And then it wasn't until I first got into college and I joined the basically the nerd club on campus there, and we had a comic book shop that was like a 10-minute bike ride away from the campus. So I figured, you know what, why not? I'll get back into comic books, and that's how I've been ever since.
Is there any mainstream stuff that you still collect and look forward to?
Not from the big two, no. The mainstream stuff that I look forward to now are from companies like Iconic Comics. My favorite series from Iconic Comics is the Soul Finder series, and I've done a couple of articles on that. And it's mostly indie stuff nowadays, or whatever interesting stuff I find at half-price books.
Like RJ and myself's indie stuff, like crowdfunded stuff, or indie stuff is still in a comic like dark. Oh, cool.
Both.
Yeah, there's still. I mean, I still like the Hellboy stuff, and Usagi or Jimbo, and but Marvel and DC, I just couldn't be less interested in these days.
Well, and it was when I got back into comics in college. That was right around they did that all new, all different Marvel. And I'm looking at these characters like, why are they doing this? And I remember everyone's reaction. Like, there were people who were pissed, like, why is Thor a chick now? Blah, 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 blah.
And with cancer. So don't forget that.
Yeah. But I remember everyone's reaction more than anything being like, why are you doing this? Because this was when the MCU was really... So it's like, why are you changing all of these characters?
America was different. Thor was different. Iron Man was a 14-year-old black girl. Every comic... My friend...
Captain America is a Nazi now.
Right. Like he said, at least once a week, some new family would come in, like a father, a mother, and either a son or a daughter. Oh, we just saw Captain America. We want to get... And they give him Captain America, and it's Sam Wilson with wings, and it's like, oh, this doesn't look like the movie. Let's get Iron Man. Oh, it's a 14-year-old girl. Oh, let's get Thor. Oh, it's not only is it a girl, but she has cancer and she's coughing half the issue. And they said that they would buy Pokemon cards, leave, and never come back.
I feel so bad for the comic shop owners back then, because once the MCU got started, they were like, oh, sweet, we're going to get some new customers. And if I was a comic book store owner, I would just be setting up all of these displays of Thor, Captain America, Iron Man. Like, here is like the omnibuses here. I would be putting that stuff front and center. And then Marvel comes out with all this new stuff, and it's like, why? Why are you doing this? Yeah. And then when people tried to complain about it with some legitimate criticisms, like, I still cannot get over the fact that they had America Chavez say, holy menstruation, what are you doing here? And it's like, what? I still cannot believe that happened. But when you're trying to point out, hey, why do these comic books suck? It's like, oh, you just hate this group. And it's like, no, we don't hate this group. We just hate what you're doing to our comic books. That is a very different thing.
I just say that they got a group of people that didn't grow up loving these characters, so they didn't have any real attachment to them. Like I say, like, when Denny ONeal died, it was like the end of Apprentices. Like you have a clause in Apprentices. Denny ONeal's death or retirement was the end of this era, and then you got all these new people, and they didn't grow up reading these comics. They didn't love these comics. So yeah, I'll change this. Isn't this funny? Look at this. Like, oh yeah, holy menstruation. Like, anybody, right? I went to a Comic-Con this weekend.
I was just going to ask you about that, John. I was thinking you have your pulse on it because you just went to the Comic-Con in New York.
I did the Comic-Con. I went to a couple of after parties, so I was like rubbing elbows with CB Cebulski and all these guys, and all I could think of is I've been reading Marvel comics for 40 years. The only person I recognized was CB Cebulski. And then one guy, we were talking for a while, and he's like, what do you do for a living? I was like, I'm an electrician. He goes, oh, you don't make comics? He goes, I hate comic book creators. So, of course, I was like, yeah, I'm making my own comic. But all I'm thinking is, you're writing comic books right now for a living, and you hate comic books and you hate comic book writers. Like, do you think Denny O'Neil would have said that if I bumped into him at a party? You
I'm
know,
pretty sure that would be a career ender if he said that out loud
I
back in the
know
day.
these people, I met them. They don't like comics. They don't like their industry. I really think what your boy Zach says, they want to get into Netflix. They want to get into Hollywood. It's just like a cute.
Although, to be fair, I got to say that if I was in their position, I don't know if I'd like the people around me either. Quite honestly.
I mean, I did have the slightest thought when all this drama started was, so what you're saying is all I have to do is call these creators sexist and I could get a job at Marvel. There was that tiny thought, but I have too much self-respect for that. Because I don't want to get into the comic and book industry that way. I want to get into it because I'm a good writer and then people would want to read the books I make. I don't want to get in there because I pointed out something problematic that somebody said 10 years ago and make that my entire identity, like some of the new talent at Marvel now. I want to get in there because they see my stuff, they like my stuff, they want me to write the books for them. That's why I would want to get in there.
Funny thing is, I did that video, probably a couple years ago now, about Bobby Chase and how she interviewed at Marvel and she just wanted an editor's job. And they told her, put your politics aside. We don't need that here. That's not going to help our readers. That's not what they want to see. And she said to herself, yeah. I'll tell him what he wants to hear. And then I'm going to do whatever I want to do when I get in there. But the thing is, you got people coming in from the left wing into jobs like that, but you're never going to get people from the right wing do that now. The other way is not going to work. You're not going to get some conservative, I don't think, saying, okay, I'm going to pretend to be a left wing fanatic and so I can go work for Marvel and then try to change things from the inside. I cannot see that happening in that direction. I just can't.
They would get sniffed out in 5 minutes
Right.
because they would say something like, hey, why don't we go back to this plot point from the past in these comic books and explore on that? And then they're like, you want to go back to the old stuff. You're a traditionalist. We need to get you out of here.
And RJ, I think you like, why isn't there conservative art? Because I think conservatives just make art.
Yeah.
They don't make conservative art. A conservative comic book writer just makes comic books. You know what I mean? So like, why isn't there expressed? Because we don't want. I don't want to read comic books about Donald Trump in a superhero outfit beating people up. You know what I mean? I just want to read good Spider-Man comic books. So, but I think the left-wing activists, they make specific left-wing art, and conservatives just make regular, old-fashioned, good old art. And so like, that's like a bad argument. If the conservatives loved art, they'd fight the culture war. They'd make conservative art. Well, they are. It's just called art.
The funny thing is, I was talking about this a couple of weeks ago on one of my Saturday videos, and I didn't mention this part, but the thing is, there's a guy right now. He's doing a gigantic mural in Washington. He's been commissioned to do it. It's been working on it for about 10 years. It's in bronze, and he's basically doing the entire thing. And he's very conservative. He's doing the entire thing in a way that looks like ancient art. And, he gets so much pushback, he says, from all the time that going back to these old ideas. Why? Because the people who make art today don't see what he's doing as actually being art, because they think that's something from the past. That's no longer what art is. Art has moved on to something new. And so if you try to go back to the old ways of doing it, that's not actually what we consider art anymore. You're just creating, a copy of something else. And that's why they don't see conservative art as art at all, because you're taking techniques from the past and you're just using them again. And they don't think of that as art anymore.
I think I have a theory about this. It kind of goes back to our conversation about the digital media and how they want to get rid of the problematic material because they think, if you see it on screen, then you're going to want to do it. This is something I've noticed with a lot of, especially activist writers. They think they can change the world through art. Like if they depict it in art, then eventually it will come into a reality in the real world. They see art as a tool to change reality. That's why they want to. And conservatives, I've noticed they just want to make good stuff. They want to make good comics. Sometimes it'll reflect their conservative beliefs, which is fine and dandy for me. But conservatives just want to make good art, and they want to make stuff that's profitable and stuff that's tried and true, proven to please audiences. Where leftists, they want to use art as a tool to change reality.
Exactly.
And they want to subvert everything because they see everything that's been done before as bad. So they try to change everything to turn the world into this upside down inverse of itself, which A, that's not how art works. And B, people aren't the way they are because they're trying to appeal to some conservative agenda. It's just how it is. Like, and there's nothing particularly wrong with going back to older ideas of how to do art or older concepts. And these people just find anything that comes from the past as bad. So.
Yeah, and I covered that New York Times article on G. Willow Wilson. That's exactly her starting point. She starts at, I got into writing because I wanted to change the world. And I think the Marika Tamaki interview she did with the Canadian Broadcasting Company, she says the exact same thing. You know, that's how they start. That's their starting point. I want to change the world. It's not I want to make something beautiful. It's not I want to make art. It's I want to change the world. And that's they're using art as a hammer. That's it.
Which is very utilitarian when you think about it. Like, ironically, they're thinking of art in a non-artistic way.
I just have to laugh because I don't know if you follow Dungeons and Dragons at all, but like it's a big, like progressives now have, oh, the orcs, you know, you guys said that the orcs are just coded for black people. So now like the orcs are more sympathetic and they're not born evil. And, you know, in the new rule books, they have like orcs in like happy communities making Mexican food and stuff like that.
And you can't have drow that are just pure evil.
Right. And to me, I just have to laugh. It's just like, you're the ones who see them. You know, I knew that they were horrific monsters. Like they don't exist. You know.
Okay. Like, who has ever looked at an orc and said, black person? No one. They just saw an orc and said, oh, an orc. Right. And so if anything, if you look at an orc and say that's a depiction of a black person, I think that shows more of your own racism, not the creator's racism.
They think they're going to end racism by having orcs making tamales. It's so freaking childish.
Or they think they're going to end sexism by emasculating all of the male heroes and having the female counterparts take over, which is like that. No, they don't understand that nowadays, especially in the United States, like big concepts like racism and sexism, they're not a systemic thing as they were way back when. They're more on like an individualistic level. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that racism and sexism are completely gone. I'm saying that it's not a big cultural thing. Like, our culture recognizes that those things are bad. And it's more just, you're just going to run into the odd jerk who thinks that women are inherently lesser, or like people who aren't pasty white are lesser. It's an individualistic thing. So I think it's particularly insulting to try and take these works of art and try to use them as tools to shame people into being less of whatever I don't want you to be. And it's insulting. I
was just going to say really quick that I have military in my family, and they're always going in and out of war zones, and they come back and they just shake their head at some of the things they see here, just because they're in actual war zones, actual parts of the world where this stuff, is real, right? Sexism, racism is just rampant in places that they go, countries that they go, places that don't have governments, and to see people complain about what they have here is ridiculous.
I don't know if any of you have seen the Barbie movie.
No,
I'm
less interested in seeing that movie. Sorry.
I will say that the Barbie movie is fascinating because you can tell that the people who were involved in that project have never experienced actual sexism before, because their depiction of the big, mean, evil patriarchy is like the Barbies are being cheerleaders for the Kens playing volleyball and giving them bottles of beer. And yeah, sometimes they're in a sexy maid outfit, but it's like the Kens aren't hurting them. The Kens are actually treating them with respect, and if anything, the Kens are treating them more on an equal basis than the Barbies are treating the Kens. And it's so fascinating to watch it because I get that they're trying to say sexism is evil. They want to oppress all of the women, but you're looking at the screen, you're looking at what they're portraying, and it's like, you guys have never experienced actual sexism in your life before. Like, go to Afghanistan if you want to see actual sexism. Go to, I don't know. It's so bizarre because
India.
it's like that's not how the real world works anymore. In the United States, I'm not going to say for other countries.
Yeah. And RJ said, I didn't see the movie, but he says, notice how the Barbies were happy under the patriarchy and they had to be kidnapped and brainwashed into going back to the matriarch. I don't know. I didn't see the movie. Like it wasn't made for me. It's okay. They can make movies that I don't like, you know.
I watched it a couple of times because I did the whole Barbenheimer thing with my boyfriend back when those two movies came out. And it was really funny because I was frustrated with the movie, but my boyfriend loved it because he loved Ken. He loved just how much that movie stuck its foot in its mouth when it came to its commentary about sexism. But I had to watch it a couple of times to comprehend it because I did a separate article on the movie talking about how this was such a hot mess of a movie. It cannot keep its narrative straight. It's like it wanted to say all of the feminist things under the sun, regardless of whether or not they contradicted each other.
Najareko says sexism to them is people disagreeing with them on Twitter. It's even lighter than that. I've covered, Women of Marvel podcasts where they talk about how not having all your lights in working order at a comic shop is sexism. It's like you people are ridiculous.
It's kind of reminded me of back when I was in college. I figured this out very quickly when it came to some of my essay writing. It didn't really matter if you were wholly correct in your hypothesis or your theory that you were trying to prove through your essay, so long as you were convincing and you were able to twist the facts in a way that would support your argument. And I think that's where a lot of these column writers are going by. It's like they have the theory first and they would try to cherry pick things that they see and morph that into something.
Solipsism isn't that when you have a conclusion and then you argue towards that conclusion? RJ, am I saying the right word?
Yeah.
Yeah. Solipsism is like, the moon is made out of green cheese, and then I'm just going to argue and pick.
Yeah.
Until,
which is why when I used to cover a lot of big articles, I say start from the end. I'll go down to the end, read the end, and then go back to the first and tell you exactly why this entire thing is wrong, because they're just putting their conclusion at the end, right? Or their thesis at the end, as if that's what they're end up, but that's where they are meant to end up. So anyway, exactly.
Well, this whole Zakhtans, they see Islam as oppressed, because they, because they live in America and Christianity is the dominant religion in Christianity, so therefore Islam is the minority religion, so therefore Islam has to be oppressed. So, and if they're oppressed, they could do nothing oppressive. It's this weird logical fallacy. You know what I mean? So that's why
it became particularly funny when the whole debacle in the Middle East, we're not going to get too into it, happened, and all of these progressives were suddenly shocked that the Muslims were not entirely progressive, and it's like, why are you shocked?
I saw
Islam hasn't changed in a very long time. Christianity hasn't changed in a long time, but it's like they've been very clear about their prerogatives for a very long time.
I saw a video of pro-Palestine gays for Palestine in Spain, and the Muslims were chasing them down the street, and they're like, "But we're on your side." It's like, I guess you don't really know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying not to get too much into this, but I have relatives in Michigan, and Michigan has big Muslim populations, and there are stories about them stoning people as they come out of churches. It's just like, this is, you know, part of what their culture is like. Can you imagine what it's like over there? You people don't even understand what would it be if you lived in an entire culture of this.
Yep. It's because they don't understand that the taught colonizer oppressed. It's a binary. For people who shout about being non-binary, they make it a binary, and because of that, again, Catholicism, they have a conclusion, so we're going to force all the arguments to that conclusion. But if I could bring it back to comic books, I saw your first article there was The Sentry, Marvel's Superman.
That wasn't my first one. That was pinned. I sometimes submit stuff to this publication called The Ugly Monster, and the guy who is working on that, he pinned that to the top of my page, and he changed the title a little bit of it because I've had people look at the title and they comment saying, I wouldn't say the Sentry is like specifically a love letter to Superman, which I wouldn't say so either. The Sentry is different enough from Earth Superman that it's a little weird, but yeah, that was my...
What do you feel about the Sentry? My opinion is I thought the Sentry was Marvel's last new great character. I love the Sentry. I love the whole hoax about it. I thought it was wonderful.
I really liked how they made it into a mystery because it's very much a superhero comic, but it's also kind of like almost like a noir mystery of this guy trying to piece together his memories and trying to figure out, why can't I remember things? Why am I suddenly getting all these dreams that I used to be the Sentry? Who is this nightmare guy? And why does nobody else remember who I am?
And also, even at the end of the series, when he gets all of his memories, we don't even know if it really happened or not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you could argue that, you know, like the Hulk remembers, like he was the best man at Reed Richards' wedding, you know, but nobody remembers because he has to forget the Void, and the Hulk calms down whenever he's with the Golden Man, you know, and he knows Peter Parker's identity, and you know he's been to Asgard. But is this the Sentry just using his vast powers to insert himself in like a wish fulfillment? It never really happened. Like, is he kind of invading everybody? You could argue either way that it is Marvel retroactively making this character part of DC Marvel history, or it's just a brand new character, got his powers, and he's so powerful and schizophrenic that his delusions are being projected into. I really think he's a fascinating character. And then Bendis got a hold of him and just turned him into, you know, the Sledgehammer character with no nuance.
You know, a fascinating way to deal with that character and to actually get people interested in comics again would be to have such a character, have such a storyline like that, like you just described, John, and just tease it out for like 2-3 years by having, you know, a half a panel and him show up in tiny little bits and pieces and have it actually be, you know, something they build on and build on. That would be, instead of trying to retroactively insert it. You know what I mean?
But that's just it. I still, even to this day, I don't know. Like, is it supposed to be that he's been around for the beginning of, you know, the Fantastic Four? Or is it, here's my cat screaming, I don't know if you can hear that. Or is he just, you know, super powerful Xavier with schizophrenia?
I think that's my favorite types of art. Like, I do like the psychological stuff, and my favorite is when you can't really tell if what you're seeing is real or if it's like a figment of imagination. Like Perfect Blue is a movie that I like, but it's also extremely confusing, and you're just trying to figure out, okay, is this actually happening or is this a delusion? And then once it's revealed in the end, you still don't really know where that line is. And that's the Sentry is that. It is very fascinating.
Labyrinth. You know, I remember watching Pan's Labyrinth, and my wife goes, "Oh, what a nice movie." I'm like, "You didn't watch the real movie." This was her making up a delusion to deal with a horrible life situation. You know, all of the fantasy stuff didn't happen, but you know.
Yeah, I think my mind works that way too, John. Is like I see something and my mind just connects things together, and that's just the way it is. There's no other way. That's how I get through these things. I'm too literal in that sense. The logical connections have to be there.
I like what Honduran says. Oh yeah, that's an amazing poster behind Heather's head. Must have been made by some base guy that lives in a shack in the forest. Yep.
Though speaking of cats, here's a little fun fact about the comic book I'm writing.
Oh,
The
yes, let me
image you
put that up.
used in the background with that's my main character Skylar. She's running on the rooftop. That cat there, that cat was not in the original script. Martin added the cat because the original script was her just running on the rooftops to try to get back to the apartment that she's kind of sort of subletting from her friend. And that cat, he just added it there. And it's like, you know what? I'm not going to complain with that. I got a couple of cats, so it's like,
So
I think it's a cute addition.
So is the cat part of the story now, or?
No, but hey, if he wants to, like every once in a while in a panel, he'll just like add in a random cat just for the fun of it. I don't mind.
I love when that happens. On page 1 of my comic Heroic Tales, there's like 3 Vegas showgirls, and one of them has lines. And I just said 3 sexy girls, and then Renzo drew whatever he wanted, you know. But my friends who read it's like, what's her story? What's her story? So now, because they showed interest in a character that was really, it didn't even have any thought behind him. Just, Renzo, do whatever you want. Draw a sexy girl. He liked to draw a sexy girl. So now I'm like, I think I have an origin for her, and you know, but I love that. Like, if this cat now, you know.
Oh no, now I have to actually create more.
So what is your comic? What's it called?
Yeah, we should probably get to that. So the comic is called Next Evolution, and the whole and it's kind of centered around the main character Skylar. She is this woman who has incredible strength, and she is also a good fighter. I haven't included it in this issue yet, but she grew up on like martial arts movies, and she taught herself how to fight. But she's this super strong woman, but she's also a little mentally unstable too. Like she'll get migraines, and she's also
I dated her.
got a bit of a
Very
temper.
strong woman who's unstable. Yeah, I dated her
And
in college.
and she figures out that this one company made this medication that her mother took when she was still in the womb that kind of altered her to be that way. And so she wants to go after this drug company and take them down because they're planning on releasing a nearly identical medication. And she's trying to figure out, A, why are you doing this? And B, why have you not been taken down yet? Because what you're doing is clearly...
Did we lose you?
I don't know. I think Heather is frozen just for a minute.
Okay.
We'll see if she comes back on.
What's the name of the comic? Next Evolution?
Next Evolution, issue number 1.
Yeah,
so link for it is in the description for anybody who wants to go over to Indigogo and take a look at it. And I think she's got another 40 days left on the campaign.
Yeah, 41 days. I'm looking at it right now. So I'm going to put the link in the chat for everybody to check out, because I really like this premise. And you know what? I will bring up her Indiegogo campaign if you want to share my screen, RJ.
Okay.
Here's Next Evolution. I like what you say. Too bad it froze, but can't have everything. But here we go. I like the black and white art. I do like the cat. Sorry, Heather, you got to make the cat a bigger character. Sorry. Yeah.
The exact same thing happened with me, John. Well, not only with Renzo, but one of the other artists that was working on Thomas Valley #1, Elliot. He's in Peru, and he drew almost, I think it started off as fan art with disc. And I said to myself, her powers don't work that way, because he started using the like stalactites of these rocks that she would be floating on, and it became part of her powers, right? I mean, I just thought, yeah, it could work that way. I'll put that in. And then in the book itself, she drops these massive stalactites, around Thor, trying to hurt him and things like that. So I love it when the artist starts to go off their own inspiration and it becomes something to change your story.
I have to say, Heather has good storytelling. Like, there's no dialogue, there's no words, and I'm following the story from the art, which is a funny thing. Like, again, I don't mean to keep bringing up my comic, but I can't help it. I sent out a preview copy to a friend to read, and he said, right here, you changed this, didn't you? And I went, yes. How'd you know? He goes, it didn't ring true. And I said, well, because originally the script as it is, with this 30s gangster and these Zeppelins in the one of my other proofreaders said, what year is this? I'm confused. You know what I mean? So I'm really sensitive about like my story confusing people, so that I tweak dialogue, but that's neither here. My point being is I think storytelling is all important, that I would err on the side of less confusion, because storytelling to me is all important in a comic. And I think that's something that the indie comics need to work on.
Definitely.
More than
It's something
art,
that I'm working on as well.
more than art, more than writing. Like, people, if you've backed my comic, when you get my comic, if you didn't like it, yeah, I'm sorry, but if you're confused, that means I failed. You know what I mean? Like, so many times I read other people's comics and I'm just like, I'm confused. Like, what's going on here? So let me know.
That was something that I don't know. Yeah, for myself, anyways. When I was reading, the first things that Zach put out there when he had put them online before he even published any books, right? And I was the first one to roast him on it because I could not follow the story. I just couldn't. And he had it lettered and everything. I was like, you're jumping all over the place here, man.
Well, read Joe Breakers, the news Joe Breakers. You didn't change. Greg Doherty says the big farmer got to her. She was speaking out of turn and whacked her internet access. You're probably right. John talks about his comic like vegans talk about being vegan. Yeah. I do CrossFit. How do you, right? Isn't that what a CrossFit is?
Can you see me now?
Are you okay? Did big pharmaceuticals get to you?
Maybe. My internet just went out and my router has decided to go kaput on me. So maybe that happened. Oh no.
I brought up your campaign in Indigogo and we were talking about it.
Okay.
Complimenting your storytelling.
So where did I leave off?
About Big Pharma, and she's going to take revenge on the people that are trying to create this new drug, which is the story.
Right. And I was going to say my main inspiration for creating that story was the thalidomide disaster back in the 1960s. Because if you remember, they created this like amazing wonder drug, and it'll take care of your nausea during, morning sickness, ladies. It's super great, and nothing was gonna happen to you. And of course, these women take it, and it results in their babies getting mutated, and they're not forming limbs, they're not forming the ears, and it's really hurting them. And that was my main inspiration. And at the time I was mentally developing the story, I was actually working at a drug company as a cleaner, and I got to see the behind the scenes and some of the craziness that went on behind there. And that's when I started developing the story, really.
Yeah, never get a job where you don't want to see what's going on in the background. Honestly,
Yeah,
that's one of my rules in life. I know when I was probably like 16, I started working in a bakery. I lasted about a week. It's like if I ever want to eat bread again, I just got to leave. Honestly.
but what was that last question that was asking about next evolution and transhumanism?
So the next evolution is about transhumanism. Interesting. That's inspired.
Oh.
He's written several great series.
So Martin was saying I should probably put.
See, whenever she starts talking about pharmaceuticals,
exactly. I think you're onto something, Greg. Look, somebody's trying to shut her up.
Yeah,
it's
yeah. The Heroinberg says, yeah, the flipper babies. I when they would talk about the
back.
I would say like, oh yeah, because the flipper babies wasn't a thing, and people would call me conspiracy theory or whatever.
Yeah, and the reason that Transmetropolitan's there is because my comic has more of like the tone of Transmetropolitan and not exactly the direct themes that Transmetropolitan was talking about. So the transhumanism is not going to be there, but it's going to be like, bringing out the truth and going after the big evil corpo guys who are making things worse for everyone.
So it's funny that he should mention it too, because we were just talking last week, John, because Thomas Valley #2 does have themes of transhumanism in it, because they're introducing new villains and called the Omega.
Is your comic, is it a one shot? Is it, you know, a limited series, ongoing series?
It's going to be an ongoing series. This is going to be the first issue of that, and the script for the next issue is already done, and I handed it over to Martin to see what he thought about it. Yeah.
Cool. I really do like your topic. It's an interesting topic, and I think it's topical. It's a topical topic.
Well, Big Pharma pulling some shady crap and putting out products they probably shouldn't. That's been going on.
Yeah, remember
well
they used to be the
after.
bad guys, and now I'm being told that I'm crazy for not trusting them.
Well, and even with like women's products, with like how many times does like a new birth control pill come out, and then 5 years later it's like, we need to take this off the shelf because it's causing all sorts of problems in women, and it's like
Well, it's cool.
So-
They tested all the birth control products on men, so you know. So there you go.
Oh yeah, they were trying to do that one pill for men a little while ago. Yeah, I think that got taken
If
out.
you continue your story, you definitely have to make part of the villains lawyers. Quite honestly, I've worked for lawyers for a long time, and they're just part and parcel of this entire thing. The lawyers keep everything running smoothly for the pharmaceutical companies.
I can't wait to introduce my villain lawyer character in my comic. I'm not even going to spoil her name because I can't wait.
My dad's a lawyer, and he would completely agree with you, RJ. Because my dad is a lawyer, and he's definitely met the type of lawyer who will go along with whatever his client wants, no matter how shady it is.
Yeah. I have an evil religious guy, an evil industrialist, you know, an evil politician, and of course an evil lawyer as villains.
Yeah, I was just seeing the comment that just popped up on screen.
You're probably too young to remember this, Heather, but you know, back in the early 80s, lawyers were akin to the devil. Like even everything in pop culture, whenever they portrayed lawyers, it never trusted, like never trusted
you watch
at
an
all.
80s movie, every like John Hughes film, that punky kid, like, you can't skate as well as I can skate. His dad was a lawyer. You know, they were always the bad guys.
Yeah, that is a little. I think I might be a little too young to remember it, but I know what era you're talking about. And it is a little funny that lawyers have done a little bit of a switch, where now they're basically seen as the civil servants rather than just plain evil.
Good PR based upon LA law and Ally McBeal. That's what it is.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And I think My Sister's Keeper also, it's a movie about this little girl who's suing to be emancipated from her parents because they basically used her as an organ farm for her sick sister. But the lawyer in that movie, he picks up the case because he empathizes with the little girl, and he wants to help this little girl get the rights to her own body. So.
Yeah, look, you're just giving out story ideas left and right here, Heather.
Well, when it comes particularly to lawyers, I've been tinkering with this idea of lawyers in hell. Like Satan has all of these lawyers that work for him that help draft the demon contracts, but they're still in hell and they're still being punished. So they still do like little things to like make the lawyer's time worse. Like they'll have all the paperwork done, and all of a sudden this new blurb comes out being like, "Oh, you have to do it in this format now," and all the lines.
Lawyers in Hell is a great idea for a comic book. That is awesome.
I got all sorts of little ideas running through my head.
I gotta ask, in Next Evolution, there's got to be other women with these powers.
Well, it's not just other women, because I called them ragers, even though rager is mostly a term used for like parties, but they're called ragers because they have a propensity to like rage out and cause destruction. And she does meet other ragers, and Actually, some of the antagonists she goes up against are other women, but they're non-ragers. Like one of them is a police officer or detective, I should say, and she starts out as an antagonist, and her big thing is she hates the ragers because she has to deal with them every day. And I won't get into too much of a spoilers, but when she does come across another female rager, she's a very important character, especially in regards to the villain. So, and her going up against Skylar reveals a lot about what exactly the drug company is trying to accomplish.
Well,
I'm looking at your campaign. Your comic is $7, or is that a digital?
that's the digital.
Oh, the digital is $2. The
Yes.
physical copy is going to be $7. It's mostly because I want to be able to get like some good protection for the comics when I ship them out to backers, because I know the post office has a propensity to bend stuff, and it's a 22-pager anyway.
Oh wow, $7. Jeez, that's awesome.
And just to let everybody know, once again, the link for that is in the description, the Indiegogo page. We're trying to get Heather above her goal, which is $2,000.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there, you just got another sale.
Yay! Thank you.
Yeah, I'm easy.
John's gonna have to buy a separate house pretty soon for all of his comics.
I've had to like seriously like tighten the belt a little bit because I am backing like too many campaigns, and it's like I gotta stop. I gotta afford rent.
That's a important question, and a couple of people like reached out and asked like, do we find like this crowdfunding is not going to last too long? Like, I don't know. Like I stopped getting comics. Like this is $35 including shipping, because you got to include shipping.
Yeah.
Because I am paying for it, so I understand my comic is $10, but it's really $20 because it's $10 to ship, for physical copy. I just don't see like, does this have legs? Like, is the goal to get into comic book stores, or?
I feel like now we're in a Wild West era where it's a lot of risk and reward, and things are niche. And because we're transitioning out from the big two and out from like the mainstream industry, because it does have some serious failings and people want to be able to branch out on their own. But I do think that eventually new indie companies are going to pop up when the old ones kind of fall to the wayside. And I think that the crowdfunding is not a long-term thing, because eventually people are going to team up and make their own like actual companies, which I wouldn't be mad if I became a writer for a comic book company.
Yeah.
But I also do like doing my own thing.
I think a lot of us are cutting our teeth on what actually needs to be done, because you can't intern at Marvel anymore. So figure it out yourself, and it's going to take you twice as long, but you got that under your belt, and there's something going to come in the future that's going to put our talents to the test. Let's put it that way.
Do you think, like, because I get my monthly comics from Discount Comic Book Service, and this month they threw in a Marvel's preview magazine, and I did a video of looking through it, and I got to say the art looked really good. Is Marvel course correcting, and if so, is that going to hurt crowdfunding? Because
I don't think it's going to hurt. I honestly don't think it's going to hurt.
You don't think so?
No, rising tide rises all boats. The more comics people can buy, well, as long as they have the money. I mean, we're going to figure that out in the next month. But
I think the crowdfunding is finally like really lighting a fire under their butts, because they're seeing these people who were nobodies 5 years ago who are making all this money on crowdfunding, who are starting up their own companies, and Marvel's like, oh crap, we have competition again. Like, people want to read those books instead of ours. We should probably fix our stuff and make our books more.
Because I look at like all of the large crowdfunding campaigns from it was when Marvel was really bad. So I just wonder if Marvel goes really good, will you know, I'm not going to spend $35 on a crowdfunded comic. I'm going to go and get this Absolute Batman. It's only $4.99. So, but RJ, you think a rising tide will float all boats?
I think the more people involved in comics, the more people who buy comics, the more people interested in comics, the more you can get your message out there that you have a comic to sell. Quite honestly, because I find there's a bit of a, it's a, what Nick used to call it, a top of funnel problem. It's
Right.
the drawing people in is the problem. It's not the selling to who you've drawn in, it's drawing them in to begin with. And mainstream is really good at drawing people in.
Yeah, I don't know. I always loved comic book stores. I still love comic book stores, but it wasn't until I talked to Chuck Dixon on my channel where he was just like, no, he was the comic book store. The death of the newsstand was the first nail in the coffin of comics. He says, you know, you'd sell 100,000 comics at 7-Eleven and Walmart, or not even Walmart, but you know what I mean, like all the little cigar shops. He goes, and then 10% of them would go into the comic book stores. He goes, and then they got rid of the newsstand, and all we have left is that 10%. And
Yeah.
you know, because I don't know, I look at it like this: nobody just wakes up in the morning and goes, you know what, I'm going to go into a comic book store and buy comics. Like, people who go into a comic book store already like comics. And then I look at crowdfunding, like, who's going to wake up and just be like, I'm going to go search Google to see if anybody happens to be making a comic book that I like. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
yeah,
I think honestly, the future of comics is what Chuck is doing right now, because he writes comics that get put into the comic shop. Him and Graham are working on Spinner Rack,
Right.
which is their own thing. He also has digital comics. I know one of the companies that I'm looking at that actually invited me to publish something digitally. I think it's a South American company. So he's all over the place. I mean, all he does is write comics, but he's got his hand in so many pies. That's what needs to be, I think, the immediate future at the very least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that because I know that some certain grocery stores still have like the Archie booklets.
Right.
And
They have little digests.
And I think that a better target is to start making more like little kid comics again, and actually for little kids, not
Absolutely.
like the pony books where they're more for like bronies and whatnot, but like actual little kid comic books, and putting them in places where little kids would be.
Yeah.
Because that's how you get them started in the first place. And hey, some parents might appreciate, well, it's not like a book, but hey, it's getting my kid to read, and you know, reading's always good. So
I did a video on is Dogman a comic, because I know that was like, you know, like Zach is like, oh, these Heidi McDonald's are including Dogman sales in comic book sales. So I was like, I don't know what Dogman is. So I bought a Dogman, and I have to. It is a comic, but including it in sales of comic books is a little bit deceptive, you know, disingenuous. But I'm glad it's out there, because I think little kids are reading Dogman, and it's getting used to panel. Go to this panel, read. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you know,
that's like Wes from Thinking Critical. I talk to him every once in a while. His kids love Dogman, and he keeps on trying to get them into comics, and they just say, no, we don't want to read that. But at the very least, they are reading sequential art. They are, you know, picking up how to read something that's in comic book format by reading Dogman.
well, and something that I've picked up from writing my reviews, and it is difficult to convince a non-comic book reader, especially an adult non-comic book reader, to pick up a comic book. But I've noticed that it's just like recommending any other piece of media. So long as you understand that individual's like tastes, then you can be like, oh, here's a comic book that can align with your tastes. Like I mentioned earlier, my boyfriend starting his own comic book journey. And all it took me to get him started on that journey was like, hey, babe, remember that Arnold Schwarzenegger Conan movie that you really like? There's a lot of Conan comics.
okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you. I forgot to ask. That's Conan got him into comics?
Yeah, kind of. And he's now working his way into the Elric comic books.
Oh, I love Elric of Melnibone. That's I read all of those comics as a kid.
I recently finished up the Stormbringer one with and I realized as soon as I hit issue 2 of the Stormbringer comic series that it was at the tail end and I missed out on a lot of context of Elric's story. And
Yeah,
like,
Stormbringer was the last of the classic Elric series. I think Michael Moorcock finished with Stormbringer, and I think years later he went back and retro inserted other books that just didn't seem to have the same flavor. Yeah. I hate that when I stumble on something like if I get into a band and I got their last album first. Oh man, I get so mad.
But I did like what I see, and my boyfriend also liked what I see, and it's just like, hey, you like this? Well, there's a comic book that's just like that.
That's the exact way to sell, right there.
I've been saying that for years. Anything you thought was cool in a movie, I could get you a comic that did it first 20 years earlier.
I have to tell you this really funny story because he bought some of the Conan comics at this convention we went back in the summer, and he was like brand spanking new to the whole like comic book buying thing, and he saw this one Savage Sword of Conan book, and he's like, $35. And I just turned to him like, babe, there are books in this building that are worth $1,000. And then the guy who was at the stand, he perked up and he's like, only 1,000.
I remember when I first went into a comic book store, I walked right up to the counter, and right there was Amazing Fantasy 15, Fantastic Four #1, and Amazing Uncanny X-Men #1, $60 a piece. Now this was probably like 1980, and I'm like, who would ever spend $60 on a comic book?
And now here you are.
Yeah, all naive me, right? And what gets me mad is even at that age, I probably could have mustered up $60 to buy one of those comics. 60 wasn't ridiculous.
There are some books that I look back on where it's like, why did I get rid of those? Or why didn't I pick it up then? Like, I used to have the original volumes of the Hellsing manga, and I am kicking myself for getting rid of them back in the day because I look on eBay at how much the first run print of the Hellsing manga is going for now. It's like, I should have held on to those.
So I wanted to ask you that, but thank you for bringing that up. So you got into regular comics and then you went into manga.
Uh-huh.
And while you were reading manga, you weren't reading, American comics at all?
I did read a little bit of the Sandman series. I had the 3rd volume of Sandman, and I blamed that book for kind of screwing up my idea about death, like the death character there. And it's like screwing up my ideas about like what it's like. But I would argue that Billy and Mandy kind of screwed that up way before then.
That's just because I'm not even joking. I got about 55 nieces and nephews, and none of them read comics, but a lot of them read manga. I just, I know it's good. It's just a genre that I'm not really familiar with. But the little bit that I did read, I thought was excellent. But I just wonder why manga is kicking American comics' ass these days.
Well, and I think it's because manga has a lot more variety. Like, there's a manga for literally anything. And American comics, not so much. Like,
Right.
I do appreciate the superhero stuff. I love some superhero stories, but I think the big two focusing on superheroes almost exclusively has shot them in the foot worse than I think either of them know. Like, I remember, RJ, you were talking about this earlier, like, you hardly ever see any new sword and sorcery anymore, or you hardly see any new westerns or detectives or even romance.
Right.
Like, you have all these new writers, and it's very clear that they just want to write a slice of life story or a romance story. And it's like, why don't you just write a romance comic? And it's because the industry is focused on superheroes for so long that they don't think a romance will sell anymore.
Well, I think it's not that they won't sell. Again, the problem is, once again, trying to get people into understanding that it's out there so that they can buy it. Because here's the thing, and I don't know if this is a one-off or not, but when I put out Crown of the Destroyer, it is probably the most expensive book that I've created. It has the art is just top tier. I have professionals working on it, like Mike Gustovich, who work for Marvel and DC. But the thing is that it did the worst of all the books that I that I pitched and tried to sell. I mean, I got the least amount of money out of it. And I don't know if it's the fact that I just have the wrong kind of audience and I can't bring in the right audience, but it's extremely difficult to try to switch the medium into something other than what people are used to and to try to hold on to the audience at the same time. That's what I found anyways.
I think crowdfunding, RJ and I are the only two people that I know of that are really doing superheroes. You know, so many other people are doing horror and fantasy and sword and sorcery. You know, there's urban detectives, but RJ, can you think of any other crowdfunders who are doing flat out superheroes? And,
well, what's his name? Perfect 10.
Perfect 10. How can I forget David Brink? Yeah, and he's doing it awesome. He's doing it great. Rippaverse, if you want to call Isom a superhero, sure.
Well, they do have the Alpha Core.
I know.
That Alpha Core comic, which was very good.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Well, I was talking more about like the mainstream industry, and unless you're like really into comic books, you wouldn't know much about the crowdfunding because the comic book media does not like to talk about crowdfunding or the indie scene at all.
Yeah, that, you know, it's funny. Like, again, your boy Zach, Diversity in Comics, he said like Comic-Con started including crowdfunded comics the last year that they actually reported real numbers, but then nobody was reporting on it. Like, like it or not, like them or hate them, like if you're doing comic book journalism, you should be talking about Cyberfrog. You should be talking about the Rippaverse. You know, I think you should be talking about Monster Island from Graham Nolan.
Or like that guy was talking about, Common America.
Common America,
they're having a new campaign in Japan. Like, they're getting an actual studio to do, I think they're like, what, animating shorts or something? But it's like, that should be huge.
You're right.
Like,
I forgot about Common America. Yeah.
Although I have to say, one of the things that, you know, I do read manga every once in a while, like One Punch Man and things like that. And I try to get into some of the smaller ones, but I'm actually working with an artist in Japan right now to do the Artemis story, which is supposed to come out probably in a year and a half. And it's basically manga based. And I'm going to probably offer it in both formats as graphic novel and in manga format. But there are subtle things that you don't know about that I wouldn't even have picked up myself. It's like the way they handle flashbacks is completely different. And the focus, he keeps on telling me, okay, because I'm basically trying to put in 4 to 5 panels per page. And then he says, okay, I can fit more panels in here. I'm going to put, you know, focus on eyes, you know, little panels like this. There is very subtle differences that distinguish the difference between how the story is told visually. And I don't know if it's a easy jump anymore for people to go from manga to comics or from comics to manga. I don't know. I mean, I read, you know, Akira and things like that in 1980. So, and I watched Battle of the Planets, probably 1979. So I don't know if people have those both worlds available to them anymore. So people are getting, you know, pigeonholed into one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, and also the way manga is written, like how they tackle the hero's journey is slightly different too.
Yeah.
And I think that especially with my generation, they're kind of identifying more with how the Japanese are portraying their heroes rather than.
I'm going to do a video about that this weekend.
Oh, nice. Like, I hardly ever see anyone wearing like a Superman. Well, I do see it, but I don't see it as often as you used to. But turn the corner and you see Goku. Like when I used to go to the gym a little bit more frequently, I would see like Goku and Naruto everywhere, and it's like sometimes I would see a Batman and Superman, but it's way more anime now.
When I was at the comic convention, you know, again, I went after the comic convention to meet people for dinner. Walking down the street, there was hundreds of people in anime that I didn't know who they were. like I'd say it was 10-1 anime to classic superhero costumes, and then the classic superhero costumes were Deadpool and Harley Quinn. You know, as far as cosplay, I'm like, here we are in New York City at New York Comic Con, and I didn't see any Supermans, I didn't see any Batmans, I didn't see any Green Lanterns, but I saw, you know, I recognized them, but I don't know their names as manga characters. I you know, with the popularity of the boys, I can't help but wonder, like, are we on the death knell of superheroes? You know, like, they say
we're on the back foot, and we're in the hero's journey area where you're down and out, John, and you got to come back. That's
okay.
the whole.
Okay, there you go. I got some inspiration there from RJ.
I don't know. I don't know the exact solution with the superhero genre, because I don't know if it's exclusively just like a change in audience perception of heroes, or a change in like the cultural climate. It seems like a very big topic that requires, I don't know, a little bit more like digging into, and I'm guessing there's like several answers to that.
I agree. I can agree completely. And again, probably that's going to include some of that in my weekend video, but I think it is very cultural, but at the same time, there's a cross cultural contamination, if you will, of people buying into a more centralized idea of what society is and what heroes are. And it's more of a Japanese way of thinking. Whether or not that's going to continue or not, it depends on how the history of America is going to unfold in the next couple of years, really.
I think one big one is what kind of hero we want to come to us now. Like, what kind of hero we think we need now. And I don't think like the superheroes that were created back in the 60s and 70s are not relevant, because those were like the heroes that represented that era and just what people wanted in a hero. And I feel like for my generation, at least, we have a different idea of what we want in a hero and what kind of hero we want now.
Well, that's my entire thing, as you would know, both of you, but that's my bet, is that it's going to be the traditional hero is what is going to be the future. I think there's going to be more hard times in the next 10 years, and it's going to put a lot of us to the test. And your only escape, in my estimation, is going to be, you got to go back to the traditional way of looking at heroism and incorporating that into your own life. That's why I make the kind of stories that I do.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course,
share the screen for 1 second, RJ, because this is the hero everybody wants, the patriarch. my character. He's a dad. He's a husband. He's a father. He's a beloved superhero, and he's a good guy. He doesn't do any of the stuff that the Homelander does, except fly. Yeah, we are in the third act of a trilogy right now, I guess.
Exactly. It's
the second act of a trilogy, rather.
Empire Strikes Back. We're at the end of Empire Strikes Back, John.
Oh, well.
Well, I am going to have to wrap the stream up. We've been on for at least an hour and a half now, but I want to give you the last word, Heather, if you want to plug your blog and talk about your book. And link for her book is in the description. If anybody's interested at all, please go on over and take a look and see if we can get her up to her Flex Gold.
Share my stuff. Get my word. Get everything out there, even if you only have to. If you only have the $2 for the digital book, I'm perfectly happy with $2, but more importantly, share the links. Share it to everyone you think would like my comic book, and share my blog too.
And your blog is on, what's the name of the
Medium. It's called medium.com.
Okay. I gotta check it out.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. And I want to thank everybody in the chat for showing up, and Heather and John, both of you, for being here. This is a great conversation. This is what I love about Wednesday nights when we do it, is that I get to have great conversations with people who love comics, which is something I could never do except for with my brothers when I was growing up. So, thank you very much. And everybody in the chat as well for joining in the conversation. So, we're going to have Comic Book Team Up next week on John's channel, and I will see everybody on Saturday for my normal videos. So if either of you have any last words, you go right ahead.
Thank you for having me on.
And Heroic Tales is it's being printed right now. It's still available on Fund My Comic and Indiegogo if you're interested.
Woohoo!
All right. Well, thanks once again for everybody in the chat, and I will see you all later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.